J'inviterais Hubert, M. Racine, Mme Morris à venir nous rejoindre ici. So, time now for question period. It's your turn to have a say. So remember that the web users from across the country who are watching us live can get to us with their questions. Pour nous transmettre toutes questions relatives à ce que vous venez d'entendre, que ce soit à l'intention d'Hubert, de M. Racine, de Mme Morris, ou d'une de nos personnalités ici de CBC et de Radio-Canada, vous n'avez qu'à compléter la section à cet effet au bas de votre écran. Vous pouvez également nous transmettre vos questions par Twitter au mot-clic RCAPA, au hashtag CBCAPM in English. Nous prendrons également des questions déjà soumises par vidéo et naturellement, the audience here in the room's theater is welcome to ask questions as well. Because time is limited, we may not be able to answer all of the questions today, but the most frequently asked ones will be posted on our corporate website. So, questions are now going off to you. We have one question up. Sir.
Thank you. Well done to all of you. Is this on? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know who can answer this, and I hope the answer is no.
No.
Not going to happen. Yeah.
No leaking the answers, though.
Is there any risk that we'll have to put up with advertising on CBC Radio?
Say no. That one is pretty simple. On Radio 1 and La Première Chaîne, absolutely not. That's why we have decided to, because we think that by doing that, we would completely denature what talk radio and what CBC Radio 1 and La Première Chaîne represent. That's where we went to Espace Musique and Radio 2. We think that those two are more amenable to the kind of advertising and sponsorship that we want to put there in order to gather a new source of revenue and continue delivering the services we deliver.
Yeah,
so the answer was no.
Must be appreciated. For the panel, the question that's coming in from email. So what's your advice for young or upcoming reporters as it relates to the skill set in order to be successful?
Surely not.
You know, I'm pretty sure that if I applied for a job now, I wouldn't get hired.
I'd hire you.
Yeah, well, thanks. I've learned that I don't actually know how to do much anymore, and that what's happened now is that the young people who come to us have this amazing tool belt of skills. You know, they can shoot, they can edit, they know how to transmit, and that matters when you're speeding in a car in the Sahara Desert. They can get the story on the air. This is very important, but I would say don't forget the basics. You know, you have to be able to communicate the information. It doesn't matter if you're revealing a cure for cancer. If you don't know how to communicate it, no one's going to hear you. So the basics have to matter. Ethics, the law, why we do this. So don't forget those. Learn it. That's a dig at me. I spelled David's name incorrectly this morning. That's a dig at me.
I think an important thing for young journalists to learn is to not say no to opportunity once you get your foot in the door. I mean, I never went to journalism school, so I'm a bit of an anomaly working in television and radio. But I got a summer job filling in because I was the editor of the local student newspaper. And then Brian Tobin called a snap election in 1999. Nobody expected it. He was only like 2.5 years into his term. And I was coming back from getting a coffee, about to go to city council meeting, and my boss at the time, who's my boss now, Peter Gulledge, pointed at me and said, "You don't have any kids, right?" And I said, "No." He goes, "You can go on the election bus." I'm like, "Yes, I can." And that's how I became the political reporter for CBC Radio.
Your advice is not have kids?
No. I was 24 or 25 at the time. So, but, you know, these opportunities come up and you have to seize them. And Adrian's right when she talks about having that foundational skill set that you need to learn how to do these things. But you see sometimes, and I sound like an old guy in the newsroom because I'm becoming the old guy in the newsroom, people want the perfect job immediately, and it doesn't always happen that way. And you have to pay your dues, and you have to do the grunt work, but you have to say yes to the opportunity and then make the most of it. And if you do that, you'll create your own work, because we work in a results-based business. You can either get the story and get to the deadline, or you can't. And if you can't, they will find the person who can. So don't say no to opportunity and hustle.
Right. Our next question comes from video, so let's go to the videotape.
Hi CBC, I'm Diana, the Reimagine CBC online community facilitator, coming to you from Vancouver, BC. Now, we have engaged over 40,000 Canadians in an effort to support, revitalize, and reimagine the CBC, and they have spoken. 84% have ranked Canadian perspectives as one of their top 3 ideas in our Reimagined CBC survey. Now, as a communications student, I know how hard it is to find content and coverage of news, arts, and culture that is uniquely Canadian. But the CBC has always been fantastic about providing this kind of content that's neglected by the private sector. But this needs to become an even higher priority. Now, some great ideas that Canadians have include teaming up with other organizations and producers to air more independent productions, as well as collaborating with the National Film Board in order to use their archives of readily available Canadian content. Now, I want the CBC to excel.
So my question for you is, how would the CBC engage with independent organizations and citizens to further bring this Canadian perspective to the fore?
So maybe 2 pieces to this. I'll do the partnership thing, and then I don't want to repeat what our 4 guests talked about when they talked about the social engagement, but we'll come back to that in a sec because that's the way we're transforming ourselves. The partnership piece, it's very normal for us in an environment of diminishing resources. We absolutely need to think in terms of how can we be a facilitator or a connector and not simply the person that does it by itself. And that's in all areas, whether it's teaming up with somebody on a culture days for 3 days, we will be a facilitator. Whether it was at one point in time teaming up with another organization to bid for games, whether it's going to be l'OSM in Montreal, where we teamed up with l'Orchestre Symphonique to produce to broadcast their first show out of their new hall. So because our environment is one of diminishing resources, also because we think that that's the way we need to change the relationship that we connect with Canadians, that's what we do more of and we will continue to be doing more of. You heard these 4 people in their different contributions to CBC Radio-Canada, now opening up to social media. We have a few examples of what we just did on Radio-Canada, Michel COG now, and I was very struck by what you were saying, David. We used to have a call-in show, national call-in show with Pierre Maisonneuve, who was there for 19 or 20 years, did a great job. But Michel COG now does a call-in show without phones. He does exactly what you do. He's doing it in the social spheres. He tweets with people. And the connection that they have there, and as per the question, is about interacting and changing the interaction with Canadians. And I think that your examples of a few minutes ago go very well to the answer to this question.
You want to jump in? Tom?
One of the challenges I think today in the media, and particularly for the CBC, is we have such loyal and passionate believers who have been with us for a long time. But the new generations that are coming along are pulled in so many directions by content and opportunities and what's out there, and they can PVR and watch it in their iPods and do all kinds of things. It's such a different way to deliver and accept what's going on in the now. So one of our challenges has been, how do we get those next generations who will feel the same way about the CBC as you do? The people what I'm excited about with our show is we're seeing lots of 30-somethings, as David was describing, watching our show. I keep saying, look, if you own a cell phone or own a house or a car or you got kids or you got a pet or whatever, you should watch our show because it's relevant. It's not, it's been on the air for 40 years, but it's as relevant now as it's ever been. But it's trying to get that out to that next generation with all the noise that's out there in the media and try to drill in and find that spot, that comfort zone for us to get them in. And no question that social media has been absolutely essential on all platforms to that.
That being said, we don't own all the answers. We're still trying things out. Some experiments are working out, others are not. We need to get feedback. That's when we throw out questions and we need feedback to adjust some of the experiences. We've got our first, through the leadership of Kirsten, who runs our English services, we've got the first all-digital station in Hamilton. That's a test case. We have something similar a bit in Montreal, where on Rive Nord and Rive Sud, and you saw the little, on the video, you saw the journalist that manned that. We have people now who are locally equipped with completely different technology to be locally embedded in the community and trying to get us some stories we never before got to, but in a kind of different way. Again, experimenting, pushing the envelope, trying, failing, coming back. That's what we're all about.
I'd like to get in a couple of questions from the room here. Oui, monsieur.
Hi, Jeff Chalk from St. John's. Thanks. So I'm a big CBC fan, absolutely, from my early 20s when Barbara Frum was on radio doing As It Happens. And I think Adrian said earlier about the quality of the Fifth Estate. My God, I mean, we can put the Americans in comparison to shame. So I hope my question is understood to be coming from a friendly person.
That being said.
We get
That
them all
being
the
said,
time.
that being said, and you know, I guess I would start with our CEO. I guess I was really flummoxed by our Olympic coverage this year. There were days I was embarrassed for Heather Hiscox. To watch Heather ride a bike around Trafalgar Square or go shopping and not have access to Canada House. Now, I understand, you know, Jacques Rogue is a big control freak and, you know, the symbol can't be shown by whomever and blah, blah, blah. So I really wondered about the value for money. What was the value for me? I didn't get any. I used to have to watch other channels. I would much more support our people going into Natwashish than Peter Mansbridge going to the Northwest Passage again. You know, like, these are my dollars. And Adrian, we met when I walked in, and I'm a big fan of your work. Why you would send someone like Adrian, of her caliber, to cover a hurricane? I thought, all right, so you got financial problems. Yeah, we heard that from your CFO and from yourself. What am I missing in those three examples in terms of value to the public, value for my dollar, right? When, as I would say, I bet there's not anybody in this room who could arm wrestle me to be a bigger fan.
You bet.
Okay, there are many pieces to that question. Let me try to do justice to it. First off, let's talk about choices of Olympic coverage. As you know, we didn't have the rights, so you couldn't see pictures. You could not see video. So the purpose of us being there was to show you something else about London that the Olympic coverage and the broadcaster, CTV, not to name it, CTV didn't do. And I think that if you, and we couldn't get our cameras into certain places, and we had to wait outside of the athletes to exit the Olympic venues for them to be accessible to us. Actually, the Canadian Olympic Committee did a pretty good job at making those athletes available to us because they know that between the Olympic Games, we're the only ones that cover amateur sports. We're the only ones that care and will show you the development of the kids and the teenagers into national caliber athletes, into Olympic and world athletes. And that's why we're very pleased that we're able to strike a deal to bring back the games to CBC in 14 and 16. And we announced last week that we're also doing the Pan Am Games, which is a step towards that. And you might say, well, like, why are you having these Olympic Games when you're having difficulty with your budgets? And the answer is because those two games will be, in the way we costed them and the way we won those bids, we think accretive, meaning, in our world, it will be a benefit to our bottom line. It will be actually programming that will bring dollars to CBC so that we can reinvest it somewhere else. So that's about the Olympic coverage and the kind of tight space a non-Olympic broadcaster is in, trying to show athletes and the city and what's happening there in a different light. I can't tell you about why Adrian was there.
Sure.
Maybe Adrian can tell you why she was there.
You know, it's funny about the hurricane. I did 2 in 2 weeks. Odd. You know, the thing is about
change?
Leslie. Yes. The thing is about Leslie is that I'm not upset that Leslie was an underachiever. You know, I don't think anyone in Newfoundland is upset that Leslie was a wimp, right? Hooray for Leslie. Go away, Leslie. But I tell you, as a national broadcaster, if we had not been here and something had happened, you would have been standing up and saying, where were you? Why don't you care? And so these are the decisions that we make all the time. You know, what this province went through with Igor was terrible. And the effort that was made after it to make sure this province was okay was important. There was a moment when it was thought this could actually be a test of the defenses post-Igor. We need to make sure it's okay. You know what? I will jump on a plane and go anywhere. And I am happy to stand there and wait for Leslie, you know, to be a wimp and wander away. That's great. You know, and I think hooray for an organization that makes decisions to go rather than not go.
And just speaking from the local newsroom perspective, when you've got an event like that coming down, to be bolstered by someone of Adrian's caliber, when Igor happened, someone whose name you'll never see on television, a woman named Angela Nost, who works as a field producer for the CBC, she came down afterwards, and for the people who were out in the field, like Lee Pitts and people in this room like Teddy Dillon and everyone who were out in the disaster zones, having that experienced hand who's been around the world handling tough stories coming down and lending you a bit of guidance and advice and support and know-how, it's invaluable. It's one of the real strengths of the company. The vertical integration, the people playing the big leagues come down here to help us out when we need them. And we really value that, I know, in the local newsroom, because we are stretched so thin when we're doing it.
And the Mansbridge.
No, I just like to get another question in, so maybe, sir.
Yeah, my question, I'll ask it in English, but please feel free to answer in French. I'm a great fan of not only the English television, but French television, the main Radio-Canada network and Le Réseau des Informations. I'm also a great fan of high-definition television. It's the best thing to happen to TV since color. The problem here in St. John's, I am a subscriber of Rogers Cable. They do have a couple of stations in French high definition. There's the Le Réseau des Sports and TVA Sport, but Radio-Canada Français and Le Réseau des Informations are not covered by Rogers. I wonder, what is the problem? Is there some technological problem with getting the signal here? Is it a problem with Rogers? I don't know. You spent millions of dollars to convert to high definition. You've closed down all the analog transmitters. Now we've got 100% broadcasting in high definition, but we get none of it what we can actually watch. Do you know what the problem is? And if so, or is it just a matter of communication with Rogers to get this fixed?
I don't know about the Rogers issue. Denise Wilson, are you here?
I'm here.
Can you help me with the answer on Rogers?
I'd have to defer to my transmission.
Okay. So I promise I don't have the answer. It seems that unless, Stephen, do you have an idea? All right. So everybody that seems to be in this room right now, we don't have the answer. We will bring you the answer. I'll stop
Corporate
right there.
website?
No, actually,
We'll
if you give us your email or number, we'll make sure that you get the answer.
Parfait. Une question qui nous arrive de Twitter. Comment montrer des histoires des francophones de partout au pays, pas juste des histoires québécoises?
Je pense que Céline a parlé de ça. Je pense que Céline...
C'est un défi pour nous. Puis je pense qu'on fait beaucoup d'efforts et je comprends que ce soit peut-être pas suffisant, mais on a des plans pour améliorer. C'est sûr que c'est difficile parce que nous, au téléjournal en particulier, notre auditoire est principalement québécois, donc il faut qu'on reflète à la fois les préoccupations des gens au Québec et les préoccupations du reste du pays. Et là-dessus, je pense que c'est vrai que parfois, surtout dans des périodes qui sont très intenses, comme des périodes de couverture électorale au Québec où le résultat est très serré, qu'on va avoir une couverture qui est plus québécoise. Mais on a des efforts à faire, c'est sûr, pour améliorer ça. Et on va les faire parce qu'on essaie de faire plus de reportages régionaux. Mais par exemple, nous, on doit refléter les régions, les francophones à l'extérieur du Québec, mais on est même obligé de refléter un peu plus les régions du Québec. Donc pendant cette élection-là, on a eu cette initiative de dire on va se promener dans les régions du Québec, on va présenter le téléjournal de là-bas, on va refléter les préoccupations des gens sur place, on va interviewer des intervenants de la région plutôt que des gens de Montréal. Donc ça, c'était un effort d'essayer de refléter un peu plus la réalité des régions. Et je crois que ce même effort-là, il faut le faire à l'échelle du pays maintenant. Mais on a présenté notre téléjournal de Moncton, on l'a présenté de Winnipeg. On essaye de faire des efforts et c'est sûr que c'est...
Je peux vous assurer qu'au niveau de la haute direction, c'est quelque chose qui est très important parce qu'on comprend très bien l'importance du radiodiffuseur public dans un environnement où il faut connecter avec les francophones qui sont à l'extérieur du Québec en milieu minoritaire. Puis c'est la même chose pour les anglophones en milieu minoritaire également. Parce qu'on pense toujours aux francophones en milieu minoritaire, mais il y a des endroits au Québec, comme par exemple dans la province de Québec, dans la région de Québec, où les anglophones sont dans un milieu minoritaire. Il faut les couvrir avec la même intention, avec la même attention que nous avons. Et c'est dans le mandat de CBC Radio-Canada. Oui, on compte le nombre d'histoires, on compte le nombre de topos, on sait qu'est-ce qu'on a couvert et on suit ça pour s'ajuster. On a encore du travail à faire.
Email question that's coming to us from John from Moncton. What do you say to those who argue that you're not accountable to Canadians?
Wow. Let's go back to slide number 2 for the chairman. There's a whole bunch of things that we're accountable to. I'll do it from the management's point of view, and maybe the chair can give you an idea of what that represents for us at the board level. Whether it's us going in front of Heritage Committee meetings, Senate Committee meetings, presenting our corporate plan, presenting our annual report. We've released close to 100,000 pages on access to information requests. We're up to about 1,650 access to information requests that we filled. There's about 30,000 of them on our website, the most frequently asked questions and what we think are the most pertinent. We've significantly improved our turnaround time, where we were not very good a couple of years ago. Now we're best in class. The transparency, you saw Suzanne now show you the results after the first quarter. We're very happy to finally be able to report on a quarterly basis. You'll be able to follow our financial situation. And that's only from the management's point of view, where we feed the information up to the board. The board then.
C'est sûr qu'on peut toujours faire mieux, mais on pense que dans les 4 dernières années, on a fait beaucoup pour être plus transparent. Il y a toujours des questions qui sont privées, qu'on doit garder, mais je pense qu'on essaie de répondre à 100% des questions. En fait, le mandat qu'on donne aux gens du légal qui répondent à ces questions-là, c'est de répondre à toutes les questions. On a l'obligation de répondre à toutes les questions. Maintenant, il y en a qu'on ne peut pas, pour toutes sortes de raisons qui sont de termes privés ou de compétitivité, mais à 99% ou 98% des questions, on veut répondre et on va répondre. Puis c'est ça qu'on souhaite faire. On veut être le plus transparent possible, des états financiers, donner le plus d'informations pour montrer aux Canadiens comment on se comporte bien comme citoyen.
And we like the fact that this is the accountability piece. We're going to be in front of the CRTC starting November 19th. You should just see the information that we're going to provide there for Canadians to look at and comment upon. So that's part of the reporting process.
Il y a une chose qui est sûre, c'est qu'il faut aussi beaucoup regarder et lire nos sites Internet qui donnent énormément d'informations. Des fois, même moi, je consulte le site pour connaître une réponse à une question que j'ai avant de la demander à l'équipe de management. Et je trouve souvent l'information sur le site. Il y a beaucoup d'informations.
Qui est très complet.
I could just add to that, I really invite you to look at our quarterly reports. They're about 50 or 60 pages. They're your quarterly reports. I touched on the financial information, but there's a lot more in there. We talk about our objectives, how we're doing performance-wise against our key indicators. So it's a really good source of information and up to date for you every 3 months.
So one last thing because this is a really, you know where I stand on accountability. In the promises that we made in 2015, we promised Canadians that twice a year there's going to be a report card that's going to be published. And this report card will have a number of indicators, and we will measure ourselves very publicly, with no filter, about how we're doing against these indicators. These indicators are not only discussed within our management team, they're approved by our board of directors. Everybody is in this room. This is our bulletin, this is our report card, and I hope that Canadians will judge us based on what we are posting up there and putting up. Sometimes and all the deltas, all the differences between where we wanted to be, the objectives, and where we actually landed are explained. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we meet, sometimes we exceed. But if you want to understand how the corporation is being managed and how we put ourselves out in terms of indicators, you will get that now twice a year, very clearly stated in our public report card.
Puis on va continuer à en rajouter des métriques au fil des années. On trouve d'autres métriques qu'on veut exposer aux Canadiens, on va les rajouter sur notre bulletin.
Thank you. Thanks to John for the question. We've got a video question. We'll go to the tape, please.
Hi CBC, I'm Lindsay from Vancouver submitting my comments in support of the Reimagine CBC project. One of the 3 most popular ideas on the Reimagine CBC public survey was more courageous reporting. 90% of the people who took the survey gave this idea 8 or more stars out of 10. Canadians want to see the CBC cover underreported stories and bring important issues back under the scrutiny of the public. As the communications manager for a group that represents citizen interest in the age of big telecom and big media, it's obvious to me that we need reporting that holds industry accountable and that gives intelligent, unflinching analysis the way that only public media can. CBC can be a leader in courageous reporting by doing things like continuing to engage viewers who want to text or email their ideas in, and by making all the news available online and easily searchable. My question for you is, how will the CBC lead in the digital age to report more courageously and engage citizens in the process?
Sounds like David would like to jump in here. But maybe Hubert first, and then David, as you wish.
Well, again, if you leave the question there, if it's at all possible, I saw 3 pieces in there. I saw courage, I saw digital, and I saw social media again. Courage, you heard stories. You heard Céline deciding to, on an evening, go with a story from Africa instead of going with a local story and trying to challenge the people who are watching. You heard Adrienne and some of the places that she's been in trying to challenge, again, our way of thinking. When we did the construction industry enquête story investigation, that was not a very popular subject matter, and a number of our people really were taken to task by that. I can go on. I mean, some of the stuff that I see Marketplace doing, making sure that what products are said to be is actually, I mean, they actually follow up on their promises. Courage, I think that's not a very big issue in our lives. For us in digital, it's a third piece in our strategic plan. We've committed to multiply by 2 our budget to become even more digital. It means that by 2015, we will have invested whatever the top line of the media budget is, 5% of our budget, up from 2.5%, because we know that's where it's going. Social media, if you guys want to talk about that even more.
Well, I think one of the things about courageous journalism is that people read a lot into that phrase based on their own individual experiences, and it means different things to different people. Like sometimes you have people screaming at you saying, why aren't you doing more investigative journalism? What they're really saying is, why aren't you doing more journalism that reaffirms my worldview? Right. Why aren't you doing more of what I believe? And that's the negotiation you often have with your audience on those things. Courageous journalism, I don't think we're ever a newsroom that's going to flinch from a tough story. I've never been a part of an editorial discussion where we flinched away. We do want to do more enterprise and investigative journalism on a local level, and the reality of the company is that we've expanded our programming with reduced staff, so you have to do more with less. So you have to be more selective and pick your spots on these things, but I know we're going to make it more of a priority here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I know the reality is we've been doing it. We've won the awards for it in Atlantic Canada for the last number of years. It's CBC that wins all of these at the Atlantic Journalism Awards and the RTNDA, or most of them. So I don't think there's any shying away from the courageous reporting. It's just, it's finding a new way to do it in the changing landscape that we've been talking about here.
I know the 4 of you could have another half-hour discussion about courageous reporting. You're all great examples of that. Try to get a couple of more questions in. Time is flying. Madame.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a CBC addict, and I'm proud of it, and have been for quite a number of years. When you live down here, there's sometimes a prevailing sense of powerlessness and not being able to influence what happens in Ottawa, for example. I'd like to know how autonomous CBC is from the politics of this country. How can you risk pulling the cat's tail? Rick Mercer seems to get off with a great deal of things in his rant. How autonomous and independent is CBC of the political context in this country if it's really a national radio station?
Sir Chairman, you want to start with that, and we'll add.
First of all, the way we're set up with the government, we have total independency from the government in matters of program, budgets, everything. We run our own shop. They cannot intervene, and they don't intervene, and I've never heard that they will intervene. So there's a total wall that you can imagine that exists and is respected by both sides. From the CBC, and the government also respects totally the CBC. That's for me. I think that
Yeah, can I maybe add to that? What Rémi is referring to is the arm's length relationship. It's been there forever. That's why, even if one of our competitors calls us constantly a state broadcaster, we are not a state broadcaster. We're clearly the public broadcaster. There's never been in my 5 years here a situation where a minister or somebody in Ottawa picked up the phone and tried to influence a story or whatever happens. Yes, we have conversations about their budget. Yes, and those conversations are constantly happening. Yes, we're called upon to move in front of hearings of committees, of different committees, whether it's heritage, whether it's finance, whether it's the langues officielles or whoever else in Ottawa. But that's simply being accountable. And the directors who are here are appointed, and once they're appointed on our board, and I'm sure the chairman could say that again, they don't have any accountability to Ottawa. Their accountability is to us, to CBC Radio-Canada, the management teams, the employees of CBC Radio-Canada. There's a cutoff from that moment on because they know what the rules are and they know what the obligations of being a director in a Crown corporation is.
Just a tidbit into that, Richard, for a second, is that the government, they're not at play at all. The real, not danger, but the real power at play tends to be corporate, tends to be business, tends to be the business community itself is sort of, if there's any kind of exertion at all, indirectly even, it's maybe from some businesses, some corporations, that sort of thing. It's not overt. It's often, it can be subtle, and certainly where I work, it's I play a bit more than maybe in other areas. But even that is tepid. But the idea, if you look back over the last 30 years that I've been at CBC, all the governments never liked us. So when they were liberal and conservative, and we've always had issues in Ottawa, no matter who was in power. So as far as I'm concerned, that means you're doing a good job.
And we like you, Tom, though, it's okay. Maybe there's quite a link here for the question from email. C'est pourquoi êtes-vous contre la proposition de Bell de créer une nouvelle chaîne de nouvelles en continu?
Here's the question was, can I answer that in English?
Sure.
And then I'm going to do, actually I'm going to start
You're
in
the
French
boss.
and then I'm going to do in English. La question c'est, pourquoi est-ce que vous êtes contre? On n'est pas du tout contre Bell qui lance une nouvelle chaîne de nouvelles en continu. On est absolument contre l'idée de prendre les bénéfices qui viennent obligatoirement dans le cadre d'une transaction, de prendre ces argents-là de bénéfices et d'utiliser ces argents-là pour venir financer la nouvelle chaîne. De la même façon que nous, on ne peut pas prendre nos subventions gouvernementales pour venir financer RDI, qui est une entité complètement différente. Ça ne s'est jamais fait dans l'histoire, de prendre ce qu'on appelle benefits money pour venir financer une chaîne de nouvelles en continu. So that's why people are saying, why did you intervene on the Bell thing? We would not have intervened in the Bell Astral transaction, and actually we were not officially intervening until that morning when Bell said, we're going to take some benefits money, and you know what? We're going to start this chain across the country, this network of news in French, and it's going to compete against RDI, and it's going to compete against NCM. We have no issue with the competition. We think that works, but you got to play by the rules. You can't use benefits money like we can't use our government appropriations to start funding the news networks of CBC Radio-Canada. That doesn't work.
Merci Hubert. Question de la salle.
My name is Ina, and I guess that will be the second part to the question about young specialists. I came to Canada from Ukraine to study journalism, and I know that CBC promotes multiculturalism on air. So I wonder if CBC is still interested in hiring people that come from other countries. Just asking.
It's above my pay scale.
Yes, let's go back to some of the programs that we have. Diversity is key. We think that you can't be a public broadcaster without being two things, deeply rooted in the regions and reflecting what Canada looks like in 2012 and making sure that the people who are not only in front of the camera or behind the mics, but the people that work every day at CBC Radio-Canada, they have to be a true reflection of what Canada is all about. And if you live and work and travel to certain cities in this country, they're changing. And that's to the benefit of this country, and we would like to make sure that our programs, and we have some work to do there, that our programs, capital P, not television, radio programs, that all of our programs are in tune with the diversity objectives that we have set at the level through Rue Lazarour and the People and Culture function.
I know we're going a bit into overtime here, but I think we've got another question from the floor. Sorry to my director.
No hockey. Might as well do overtime.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're used to it. We're used to it.
Yeah. Ivan Power from St. John's. We see pretty clearly that the government is a reluctant funder of the CBC. It raises the question in my mind. For instance, the panel is very proud of the way that CBC reporters can present Canadians to Canadians in depth, to go back on a story and so on that no other broadcaster can do. Raise the question: what? And I see that there's a wall between the government and CBC, but nevertheless.
Yeah,
oh,
just
like
point
that,
your microphone.
like that, popsicle style. What would the government like you to be doing? In other words, they're funding you reluctantly. You're presenting Canadians to Canadians in appropriate depth. Are they happy that you're doing that, or would they really wish you would go away?
Thank you for the question.
At CBC Radio-Canada, here's how it goes. We have a Broadcasting Act. The Broadcasting Act defines our mandate. In that mandate, there are a number of things that we need to do to be able to meet the expectations of Canadians. The funding piece has been reduced. At the end of 2015, less than 60% of our funding will come from government, which means that we will, through our own activities, continuously find and try to find new sources of financing in order to continue delivering services to Canadians. And that's a big switch from about 70% or close to high 60s a few years ago, now back down to less than 50, it'll be 58 something. Now, when we, just as an example, as a management team, with the board strategic committee and with the directors, decided that strategic direction 2015, everyone, every way, was going to be the way for us of the next 3 years, we built it, decided upon it, approved it, and then we said, here's where we're going. The only way for the government to change the mandate of CBC Radio-Canada would be to change the Act, or to review the Act and the scope and the mandate and the activities of the broadcaster. We don't have these conversations, and this is where the arm's length conversation, the arm's length rule, takes all of its meaning. We don't phone up the government and say, would you like us to cover this story or do this particular thing? We have a view. We interact, we hear what you want to hear about. This is why all the social media and the feedback that comes to our journalists and is then the subject of so many stories. But there's no conversation about what would you like us to do. Rémi, would you like to add to that?
I'm going to say that we've decided to be more Canadian, more regional, and more digital. We've decided that. The board, the management, the employees, the team. We've decided to go, this is our direction. We've showed this to Parliament. We showed this to the Minister of Heritage. But it was a fact. You have to understand, it's a fact. This is where we're going. When they decide to cut our budget, well, they cut everybody. First of all, you have to understand, they cut us and they cut everybody else. They cut the whole government. So we were cut like everybody else. I think that I agree with what some of you said. All governments hate the CBC because obviously, as a news organization, we do get and ask questions, and obviously politicians don't like to be asked questions. Sometimes they're uncomfortable, but this is our job, and we represent Canadians basically, and we're the public broadcaster.
But that doesn't mean that when we put out our plan and we heard our minister, James Moore, or other ministers in government say, you know what, 2015, we actually like what the broadcaster is doing. We think that is a true reflection, an incorrect reflection of what the modernization of the mandate in the Act is. We said, all right, we're in the right direction. But it wasn't, it was post facto. Remember, since 1991, the Act has not been amended. We are living with a mandate that has not been changed for over 20 years. We looked at it and we interpreted in 2012 what we think, 2011 actually, because that's when we launched it. We interpreted what that Act means and how we can make it more vibrant, more connected, and actually more alive. And this is what more Canadian, 2015, being more Canadian, more regional, more digital is all about.
Merci. One last question from the hall, please.
Bonjour. Pardon,
Oui,
bonjour.
allez-y.
Je suis de Saint-Jean. Vous l'avez annoncé tout à l'heure, vous souhaitez que les francophones hors Québec continuent à être visibles sur les antennes de Radio-Canada, et je n'oublie pas les anglophones du Québec. Je voudrais savoir, dans une période où vous avez des décisions difficiles à prendre, vu les coupures budgétaires, on en a parlé, avez-vous pensé à consulter les communautés linguistiques en situation minoritaire avant de prendre des décisions qui peuvent être potentiellement extrêmement difficiles pour elles? Je donne un exemple. Dans une région de St. John's, où récemment nous avions 3 postes à Radio-Canada, 3 postes de journalistes et caméramans francophones. Si on retire 1 ou 2 postes, comme c'est le cas au jour d'aujourd'hui, c'est dramatique. C'est certainement difficile à Montréal, mais dans les provinces hors Québec, c'est une catastrophe. Je pense aussi à nos collègues anglophones qui doivent vivre également les mêmes inquiétudes. Donc je souhaite savoir si vous avez une politique en termes de communication et de consultation des communautés linguistiques officielles en situation minoritaire.
Alors la réponse est oui, on a des conversations constantes qui sont animées et dirigées par Louis Lalonde, qui est le chef de CBC Radio-Canada, de Radio-Canada, et qui avant, étrangement, ou de façon intéressante, était la personne responsable des régions pour Radio-Canada. Alors Louis, non seulement avait dans son DNA,
ADN?
dans son ADN, pardon, dans son ADN les régions, mais là maintenant, il a non seulement il a une préoccupation additionnelle. On a un panel des régions à qui on parle de façon régulière. On a constamment, à travers les chefs de nos stations dans les différentes provinces du Canada, des conversations avec les organisations francophones des milieux pour avoir le plus de feedback possible. Alors, nos connexions sont constantes, sont souvent organisées, presque statutaires, et c'est l'objectif parce que ce serait impossible pour nous de pouvoir décider nous-mêmes à partir de, je ne sais pas moi, de la haute direction, qu'est-ce qui fait du sens pour une région ou une autre, pour l'Acadie ou pour les gens à St. John's ou à Regina, les francophones.
Merci beaucoup. So that's the end of our question period. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to our management team.
Thank you, panel.
Merci beaucoup de votre participation. Thank you very much to everybody across the country who's been participating to this event. If I can leave you with one message, thank you for caring about CBC and keep doing so. Merci beaucoup et bonne fin de journée.